So today marks the second week of Advent, and there's a sort of ritual that I've been doing every morning since Advent began last Sunday. And what I'll do is I'll wake up, usually while it's still dark. I'll grab a cup of coffee, and I sit in the gray chair in my office, and I'll light a candle as I sit there, opening up Spotify on my phone, and this is the song that I play. Oh come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lowly exile here until the Son of God appears. And there's a gazillion versions of this song out there, from traditional choirs to Sufjan Stevens, and I listen to them all. There's verses like, "O come, thou dayspring from on high, and cheer us by thy drawing nigh. Disperse the gloomy clouds of night, and death's dark shadows put to flight. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel." I mean, this song is about as far from Jingle Bells as you can get, right? You know, Rachel Rim, who's actually wasn't able to be here with us today, who wrote our beautiful Advent devotional. You can get one on the back table on your way out. But in her introduction to that devotional, she wrote, "We are living in a deeply desperate moment. Wars abound, tragedies are ubiquitous, and politics feels hopelessly divisive. Though the world has always been fraught, something about the present moment feels uniquely so." I mean, do you feel that too, coming into this Advent, that the world has always been fraught, but there's something about this present moment that feels uniquely so? You know, I find these days that I don't have my own words to pray. I'm a priest who doesn't have my own words to pray. It's like what's happening in the world is too terrible. And what's happening in people's lives, in our very congregation, is too sad. And my words just feel so inadequate. And so this song has become my soul's prayer in this season. And there's something about it. It expresses this deep longing, like that ache between what is, sorrow and bondage and night and suffering and death, and what we long for, belonging, freedom, healing, flourishing, wholeness. In other words, shalom, peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of shalom for the world to be made right. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." In other words, there's something about peace. Those who love peace, who bring peace, who create peace in the spheres of our world that uniquely reflect people as being children of God. And it's because peace is God's dream. It's the dream that's implanted in the imagination of every single person made in the image of God, even the most hardened cynics. It's your dream. It's my dream. But if we wonder sometimes that it's a pipe dream, it's because it seems so impossible because of, reality, right? Reality. So as I've been reflecting on peace over this week, I was reminded of this passage in a book that I love called, very aptly, The Holy Longing by Ronald Rolheiser, where he talks about prayer as pondering. And as he explains what he means by pondering, he means carrying tension. prayer as pondering or carrying tension. So just stay with me as I explain this idea, because it is absolutely essential to peace and to being a peacemaker. So the Greek idea of pondering was more to like intellectually contemplate life's great mysteries. Think of Plato and Aristotle, pondering in that Greek sort of way, intellectually, life's great mysteries. But he says Scripture reflects more of the Hebrew understanding of pondering, which is less about trying to grasp something intellectually and more about holding these mysteries, these things that are not so easily resolved and understood or controlled, but holding these mysteries inside one's soul, complete with all the tension that it brings. So Rolheiser writes, thus, when Mary stands under the cross of Jesus and watches him die, and there's absolutely nothing she can do to save him, she is pondering in the biblical sense. The great illustration of this is Jesus sweating blood in the Garden of Gethsemane, embodying this connection between suffering and faith, the necessary connection between sweating drops of blood in the garden and faithfulness. And in this world, you cannot be a peacemaker without sweating blood. You cannot, like John the Baptist and Mary, stand on the frontier of the old system of death and violence and despair passing away, and the dawn of a new age of healing and restoration and redemption, God's dream of shalom, standing in that place of the already not yet, and not hold tension. And all the forces of hell would want you to resolve this tension because it's easier. Right? It's easier to just give yourself over to rage or give yourself over to this sunny optimism. But I urge you to resist. There's tension in holding this idea of us, that there's no us and them. There is only us. Mother Teresa said, today, if we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. That man, that woman, that child is my brother or my sister. If everyone could see the image of God in his neighbor, do you think we would still need tanks and generals? Don't let that just go in one ear and out the other. If we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. We belong to each other. That is a fundamental of peace. So recently I was reading this really moving article in the New York Times. You may have seen it, about activists from the organization Standing Together, whose leaders were here in the U.S. recently to speak to people about what's happening in Gaza and Israel. And the subline said, Sally Abed, a Palestinian citizen of Israel, and Elan Lee Green, a Jewish Israeli, found polarization in America over the war in Gaza. They also found longing for a new approach. And so Sally and Elan, what they do is they come in to speak to groups of people, and they begin with the starting point of us, of Palestinians and Israelis living together in the land. And they say, this isn't kumbaya, let's all hold hands and love each other. There's actually no way that one side is going to win. Our futures are intertwined, and the only way that we can keep ourselves alive is by keeping each other alive. And as they talk about this us, which is so out of step with our polarized conversation in our country, what they say is that they've seen in attendees a palpable sense of relief. And they say sometimes people audibly exhale, or they place their hands over their hearts as they listen. It's embodied, this dream of God implanted in the soul of every single person on the planet. That's where that exhale comes from. Peace means holding the tension that two things can be true at the same time. Don't let that go in one ear and out the other. Two things can be true at the same time. Your country, your nation, can inflict terrible, horrific damage on another group of people. And your nation can have people who are precious and made in the image of God and worthy of protection and belonging. Two things can be true at the same time. I love how Tish Harrison Morrison describes Advent as a season of heartbreak tinged with hope. Heartbreak tinged with hope. You can feel the pain around you, that sometimes we feel like it's just going to swallow you up, and have hope that this is not the only reality. I heard a story recently about these parents that we know who have a daughter who tried to kill herself. So young, I think only 12 or 13 years old. And what they had to do is they had to lock up all of their knives and their scissors and anything that she might use to harm herself into these lock boxes. And then you know what they did? In that heartbreaking reality of knowing that your child wants to die and having to lock up those things that would harm her, what they wrote on the outside was, "You are loved." On every box, "You are loved." And holding those two things that are true at the same time, that even though she felt worthless and that she didn't deserve to live, that no one wanted her, that feeling of it, and that truth and reality that she is loved more than she could ever imagine. And that in this world of sorrow and despair and evil, that right alongside it, often right in the middle of it, that there is beauty and goodness and joy there too. And that sometimes in those seasons when maybe you really genuinely don't have hope, that someone else can have hope for you. That in those moments when you feel like you cannot pray, that maybe someone else has the words to pray for you. That maybe even if, like Moses or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., you don't get to enter the promised land, that we may never see peace achieved in our day, that peace that we long for, that there will be Joshuas who will be raised up and who will take that baton from us and keep fighting the good fight of faith. That it is not ours to carry alone because it's too much. We cannot carry it alone, and we weren't meant to carry it alone. So when we think of holding tension, we might think of like a rubber band. And actually, I was thinking about a rubber band, and then I actually saw a rubber band in the office. So a rubber band like this. And if there's too much tension, what's going to happen? It's going to snap, right? But as peacemakers, when we carry this tension for the sake of love, as Jesus did, when we resist that easy resolution, whether towards hate or towards that sunny optimism, what happens, Rolheiser says, it becomes a gestation process. Something begins to happen. A transformation is set in motion. And the holding of that tension becomes the love that energizes our action in the world. Let me see if I can do this without hitting myself in the face. Tension. Ooh. It becomes the energy of that love that propels us into action. And so when Jesus sweat blood in the garden instead of running away, when he held that tension, it was there that he was able to draw strength in the face of what it was that lay before him, the cross. As the Apostle Paul writes, and I'll just close with these words. Paul writes, "For he is our peace. In his flesh, he has made both into one, and has broken down the dividing wall, that is, the hostility between us, that he might create in himself one new humanity in place of two, thus making peace, and might reconcile both to God in one body through the cross, thus putting to death the hostility through it. O come, desire of nations bind, all peoples in one heart and mind. Bid envy, strife, and discord cease. Fill the whole world with heaven's peace. Join me in singing. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to